Hoffman, and today we are in Aspen, Colorado, talking to a very inspirational person, someone that has a story unlike anyone you've probably ever heard before. Her name is Amanda Boxtel. And Amanda, how are you?
Oh, I'm great.
You're good?
You can ask me the 30-second
All right.
elevator
Here's
question.
the 30-second question. You're in an elevator, maybe with a literary agent or a publicist, and they say, Amanda, tell me about yourself. What makes you different?
What makes me different? I'm Amanda Boxtel, but I think often the name identifies us as as a person, and really I'm ordinary. Someone said to me the other day, Amanda, you're extraordinary, and I challenged her and I said, no, I'm ordinary, but I'm living an extraordinary life because I do have a story that has created the woman that sits before you today. And then I slept on it overnight, and I serendipitously met this lady again the next day. And I went up to her and I said, you know what? I said, I am extraordinary, and I own it. I own it. I'm extraordinary.
So then the question is, what makes you extraordinary? And it's a twofold question, in your mind, but in the minds of the person that you were talking to. Let's start with the person you were talking to. Why did she think you're extraordinary?
Because I live an inspired life. I feel like I walk my talk. That's what I try to do. And even though I'm in a wheelchair, I still figuratively and literally walk my talk. And that comes with authenticity. I'm trying to live my most authentic life and to emanate that out to others so that I can receive it back. And that's, I think, what creates me. And I've lived with adversity. Adversity has created me. And
could you tell us a little bit about that adversity for people that might not know you?
The adversity meaning why I'm in a wheelchair?
The physical
My
adversity.
physicality.
If that's what you're referring to. I don't know.
I think adversity comes in many different forms. They're the physicality that you see sitting before you, but then we all have hidden disabilities. We all have emotionality, challenges that create us, that make us up, and it depends on whether we are able to move forward and let go, surrender, move forward, and almost transcend into something else, the person that we aspire to be. And I still have maybe a person that I aspire to be, but I'm real, and I'm joyful. I feel like I exude that, but it's not just a happy-go-lucky girl that sits in front of you. Life is very much, for me, and has been, up and down, and valleys to traverse, and bloody tough hills to climb. So
motivation, it really has a lot of ebbs and flows. I think that's what you're talking about.
So I didn't answer the question, but I have the mental, the emotional, and the physical adversities that I've had to deal with in my life, and they're probably greater than some might experience in their lifetimes.
But you were able to overcome them, and it seems to me like prosper from those events. And that's where there's a divergent path when it comes to motivation. Some people can encounter an environmental event, and in this case, you had a skiing accident, right? Or they can encounter a psychological event, which could be grieving, or it could be losing a job, or whatever. But people come to a point where they're able to prosper from that event, or they become dependent upon that event. So is there anything that you could share with us that said you didn't take, doesn't sound like you took the dependent path, you took a much different path?
I think an adverse situation can either make or break a person. And I think I'm resilient. I have an indomitable will. and desire to overcome and to surmount whatever is ahead of me. And that comes deeply from within. It's my inner faith. And faith for me is not religion. It's not, it's tapping into an inner strength of steel that is fearless. And it's a play, it's a dance between, and it's walking that fine edge of fear and being fearless. And when I walk that edge and that fine line, and I try and live on that line, and it's exciting. It keeps me on the edge of my seat and on my toes, but it could go either way. And but I have the courage and the strength and the will and the desire to walk that line, and it's that tipping point where it could go either way, and I'm driven to push myself. And I think the little girl that I was, the 7-year-old girl that was challenged by her father, Boxtel always tries his hardest, that became me as a youngster, to the point of jumping off bridges in Papua New Guinea into fast-flowing rivers and doing crazy things, that I became the adventurer.
You gave your father a hard
the
time,
outdoorsy.
did you?
Well, yeah, I became the outdoorsy woman, but
Yeah.
I have this this passion for outdoors, I think, from that. But the adversity that I experienced as a youngster, my father committed suicide when I was 12, and it was a horrific situation, and a lot more than committing suicide. But he said to me, I'm going to share a secret with you. And I was 11, and he said, but this is our secret and don't tell anybody. And he said, if you were to die, how would you do it? To an 11-year-old girl. And and then I turned 12, and then a few months later he did that, and I felt responsible. I kept that secret for 18 years until I shed it when I think I was 29, and it was empowering and life-affirming, and to be able to share and to be able to let go. But more than anything, what helped me transition and move beyond that was the power of forgiveness. And to shrink my father into a little father and place him into my heart when I was just a few years ago, and in a long meditation, and to say, I forgive you, through many tears. And so it's been a life's work of processing this. But I believe that little girl inside of Amanda helped me become resilient, helped me strive for something more in my life, always. To look at the more optimistic side and just almost prove myself that I can, as opposed to I can't. And so when I was paralyzed,
I interrupt you for 1 second?
Then that helped me get beyond.
We're going to come right back to that in a minute, okay? Hi, we are back with Amanda Boxtel. And Amanda, I know you were just talking about your father and what an inspiration he has been for your whole life, and I want to get back to that. But a little bit before that, you took, no?
Let me cut you off.
No,
he
okay,
hasn't
go
been
ahead.
an inspiration. No, this man was emotionally abusive, and abusive in many different realms, let's just say that.
Didn't he help you be resilient, though?
So let me back up, and I wouldn't say my father's an inspiration. I would say that, and I would like to hear your definition of what inspiration is and what motivation is.
Okay.
And because for me, I think it was a little bit more of a motivator for me to somehow go deeply within and find that true essence of Amanda that can overcome. And I was able to become the adventurous athlete with the passion for the outdoors and to push myself, I think because of him. Yet he did many cruel things. And so it's finding a place of forgiveness. It's not that I accept what he did and who he was and why he did that. That is not acceptable. Yet, he didn't know any better, perhaps. That's a whole different conversation. But for me, I've learned over the years that it is what it is. I can't change what happened. It is what it is.
Well, that's a really important lesson.
It doesn't become me. I haven't allowed Amanda to be a victim of my circumstance. I've been able to remove any self-imposed limitations from my past. My story doesn't become me. It's what I've chosen to do with it that becomes me. And that is my story. And to help propel me forward. And you asked me a question, and that question was, well, what is that line? What is that fine line that I choose to walk? And I have chosen to walk as a woman. And do you want me?
I want you to say whatever's on your mind, but I would like you to clarify. Maybe you can give an example of walking that fine line as to what that means. And what's the tipping point from one side of the line to the other? Anything in particular?
An example of walking the fine line, the line on one side is acceptance, on the other side is hope. And at some point, acceptance and hope must coexist. There's a dance, and they must interplay. And I've learned, and it's still an ongoing life lesson, and my greatest lesson, through paralysis, through my childhood experiences, and through the adversities that I've encountered throughout my adult life, is okay, where is that fine line, that intersection between acceptance and hope?
Sounds to me like you don't accept anything. I don't know, is that accurate?
No, it's not accurate.
No?
No, I accept, I have had to accept my paralysis. It's like Amanda, paralysis can be for life. And so in arriving at a place, I accept that is the lesson, to be able to reach a place of acceptance of my reality, whatever it is. And that acceptance is right here, right now. And I don't know what the next moment will bring. I don't know what the tomorrow will bring, what next year will bring. None of us do. But right here, right now, I'm okay. And I accept Amanda for all that she is right here, right now. But with the power of intentionality and projecting and thinking, okay, with intention, and having a little bit of hope for what might be, then that's where the delicious intersection is. And that's where the line is. And so that's my dance. And for right here, right now, I'm paralyzed. But I don't know, with my intention, with everything that I choose to do in my life, to have the optimal quality of life and to be always in pursuit of that, I'm hopeful, and my hope can be tangible with equipment like this, like a bionic exoskeleton suit, like the equipment that I choose to work out with, so that I can be hopeful for having a better quality of life and regaining, maybe rewiring those neural pathways in my body. So that's the example right there. The line between,
Well,
is that?
that's definitely clear. Now I understand what you're saying. I think we may have what we call an essentialist argument in psychology in terms of what acceptance is. My personal opinion is you don't accept anything. You're a realist, but you don't use that as a means to reflect on yourself. The view that you have of yourself is that you assess your circumstances and then proceed from that point going forward. Many people don't take quite that same path. They accept those circumstances and start moving forward, which really gets into the difference, as you said, between motivation and inspiration. So where you channel and direct your energy is your motivation. The reason that you do it is the inspiration that you've so clearly explained to us. Or explained to me.
I think that was probably a well-rounded synopsis of what I just said, yet I challenge you in that I have lived with acceptance, and it's been a life lesson in that 5 years after paralysis. I was paralyzed when I was 22 years old from a freak somersault while downhill skiing. And that was a pivotal moment in my life, yes. But the greater pivotal moment was when, for 5 years, I lived with nothing but hope. And I took out acceptance from my vocabulary.
I see.
Completely. I was not going to accept paralysis. And so I did everything I could to walk out of those hospital doors. To prove the doctor wrong. The doctor and the guy upstairs, God, everybody. It's like, no, I'm going to do it. I can do this. I tried every type of holistic healing method. And damn it, 5 years later, I was still paralyzed. And there was a pivotal moment that happened.
Okay, wait.
That took me to that point.
Let's come back to that in a minute. Amanda, we are back, and Amanda was just alluding to a pivotal moment that happened 10 years out after your accident?
5.
5, okay. 5 years out. What happened?
And life is a series of pivotal moments. So it's not just one, but they are pivotal moments that somehow change us. If we have it within us to seize that moment and the power of the moment and to learn from that moment and then take it forward. And so
you don't think it's a building up process? Did it take time to get to that moment, or is there an actual, what in psychoanalytic terms would be a catharsis that happened, or is it a gradual process?
I think it's both.
Okay.
I think it can be a cathartic moment. I think it can be a gradual process. There are pivotal, my ski accident, paralysis was a huge pivotal moment.
Sure, that's very
but I
focused.
think we can learn, this was a build-up, and it was a point of reckoning where I was taken down and completely just taken down to brass tacks, to the raw essence of Amanda. And I was 29. A friend carried me up the stairs. He was 6'4", and he carried me up 3 flights of stairs, left my wheelchair down below, put my body on some pillows in his living room, bought me a cup of tea, and we just were talking on the floor.
Right.
And my wheelchair was downstairs still. And he said, okay, let's go for a walk.
Yes.
And I said, sure. Figuratively, I still can walk. I go for walks all the time. That's still part of my vocabulary. And he said, what are you waiting for? Let's go for a walk. And I said, you know, I'm waiting for you to go get my wheelchair and then I'll go for a walk with you happily. And he said, you don't have a wheelchair. You can walk, let's go for a walk. And I looked at him and fury, anger just welled up, tears, every emotion. And I said, I can't walk. You go get my wheelchair now and I'll go for a walk. And he proceeded to take my hand and he dragged me across the carpet. And I said, I can't walk. And he said, who are you angry at? I said, I'm angry at you. I'm angry at God. I didn't know who or what, and I still don't know if God exists. And I'm angry at my legs. I can't walk. And it was in my face. And he picked me up and he put me on a chair that was strategically positioned on a tiled balcony overlooking the Brisbane River. And he sat me there, and I was sobbing. And he came back with an armful of china plates from his kitchen. And he picked up a plate and he threw it, and it smashed. And he gave me that whole plate. And I sat with the plate on my lap. Plates.
Right.
And he said, do it. And I picked up a plate and I threw it and it smashed. And as I did this, it was a process, and I felt my spirit smashing into a million pieces. And my heart was grieving. Yet somehow, after that, I found a place where my spirit was able to rejoice for everything it had left. And it wasn't about my legs. And I sat on this floor. He had picked me up again after that incident, and he gave me a journal. And he taught me a technique of writing with the dominant hand and the non-dominant hand. And I asked myself the questions with the dominant hand, and I answered with the non-dominant hand. And I had all the answers within. I didn't need to ask him, a therapist. It was there. And it's like, Amanda, you respect your legs as a temple, as you do in your whole body. You're not half a woman. You're very much a whole woman, a beautiful woman. And you celebrate your wholeness. And so I learned somehow that paralysis could be for life. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but right there at that moment, I was okay. It's like, this is me. And I had this awakening, this revelation that it's just about right here, right now. And I accept who I am right here, right now.
Well, that was quite a story. It really was. We'll come back to that in a minute as well. Well, Amanda, that was quite a story. And I know there's a lot of emotionality attached to that. That emotionality helped define who you were then and who you are now. Reflecting back on that moment, that was several years ago. What did that do for you going forward? In terms of what you've accomplished since then, how you set your goals, the plan that you put together to meet your goals?
It was 18 years ago. So it was, I think, a lot of pivotal moments after a tragic, chronic circumstance that might occur in someone's life, no matter what it is. I believe, and it would be interesting to do a study on this, that the 5-year mark is usually a pivotal mark, a pivotal moment, that 5-year mark. And I turned 30 that year.
Is that the pivotal moment, the 30? Or is it just that,
No, I think it was
Yeah.
the 5-year mark, but I made a list of all the things that I wanted in my life
okay,
for when I
is that,
turned 30.
do you write that stuff down?
I wrote that
Yeah.
list, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course those lists, change.
Yes.
And back then I thought I'd be married with 2 kids at the age of 26 and living in Australia, and who would have, I couldn't have scripted my life had I tried. And now I'm, 46 and I'm living in Colorado, paralyzed and walking in a robot. I mean, you can't script that stuff.
No, you never know what's going to happen.
And so,
I agree with you there.
But I turned 30 and I wanted to still have children. That never happened. And it's a little bit of a sadness that hovers in my heart. And I'm not married. That never happened. But I've lived a really rich and full life. And a lot of those things that were on that list were emotional. Some of them were materialistic. I learned fast that if I intended something and I really focused on it and I put my body in that experience as if I was creating it in my mind, in my waking dreams, that I could manifest. I learned that early on. So I manifested the Jeep Grand Cherokee with the the power seats and the car and it's like, okay, I can do this. So I learned the power of intentionality at a young age. Yet there was one thing on that list that didn't make the one thing. When I reread the list the next morning, I woke up on my 30th birthday and it didn't make the list. And the one thing that didn't make the list was the one thing that I had yearned for 5 years. And the one thing was walking. Walking didn't make the list, and it would have been number 1 on the list. And when I had that realization, it was an epiphany. It's like, my God, I have arrived at a place of acceptance of my reality. That's when I knew that I had truly accepted that it wasn't number 1. It didn't even make the list. I said, wow. Yet I still had taken hope out of my vocabulary. It didn't exist. Hope was still not in my vocabulary. And for many years, it wasn't. And I toyed with the term of false hope and real hope. And what was false hope for me and what was real? And what could I really put my hope in that was going to enable me to move forward? And eventually I had stem cell treatments in India. I had 3 years of stem cell treatments. I was a complete paraplegic from here down. I knew that I needed to exercise, that if I could move it, I should use it, otherwise I would lose it.
Right.
And it was very important. So all along, I've been moving my body, and not just above my lesion, my spinal cord injury, but I've been moving down here, whether it's Pilates, massage, standing in a standing frame, in parallel bars, doing whatever I could do. And thank God, because 22 years later, the research is just coming out that the spinal cord is as malleable as the brain. It has a memory.
Yeah.
It's plasticity. It can rewire. It can relearn. And there's evidence now for high dosage locomotor training and stepping. So I have rewired my body, and I still have this uncanny insight that at some point in my lifetime, I might walk on my own 2 legs, and that's hovered there. I've never let it go. Never let it go. It's just been a part of me.
Well, that's what really intrigues me about you. It seems like you had so many opportunities to give up. The incident with your father, the incident on your 30th birthday, these are the types of events where some people say, I've had it, I give up. Why didn't you give up? It's the $100,000 question.
It is. And I am a woman that just has this, somehow, this indomitable will, this inner strength that when because I have hit rock bottom many times in my life, not
Right.
just with over my father, over paralysis, but other pivotal occasions in my life. And I have been able to, instead of spiraling down, I've been able to harness that moment in the depths of challenge to somehow rise up,
But do you know why?
somehow. And I think it's the circumstances in my life that have brought me to each time.
Mhm.
I think it's, if I could do it before, I can do it again, and I
Okay.
can pull myself
So
up.
you believe
And
in
it's
yourself.
I believe in myself. It's a part of my makeup,
Mm-hmm.
and but again, it's like the way I'm able to do it is like, okay, right here, right now, it's devastating. I'm at rock bottom, but I know that it can change, and
Mhm.
it does, and it changes with a series of tools that I've learned throughout my life to incorporate to pull myself out, and
Mhm.
whether that's
Wait,
out of the
wait.
depths of challenge.
Hold on with those tools, okay?
Oh,
We'll be right back and talk about those tools with Amanda Boxtel, who is going to share with us some personal strategy methods. You call them tools, I call them strategies, same thing, that you use to persevere. Or if that's what
yeah.
you're referring to.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you encounter obstacles in life, which many of you've described many, and I think you have some very positive self-beliefs. And those positive self-beliefs are a function of the things that you've experienced in your life, but I think it's a lot of some core spirituality that you have. Maybe you can kind of elaborate on, not necessarily the source, but what are the specific tools that you think you use to overcome those life obstacles?
Those tools have changed as I've matured, and so I think it's a constant evolution for any person. But the core fundamentals that I look at are, I guess it's coming back to my values and my living principles.
Mhm.
How do I choose to be in this world?
Right.
And who do
Sometimes
I want to be?
called worldviews.
Okay. So, an attitude, you mentioned attitude. Typically an optimistic woman.
Yeah.
I'm a realist, yes, but I'm optimistic for sure, but not airy-fairy, so not to the point of, not being realistic. And out here, I feel like I'm very grounded, yet I have a sense of optimism. And someone said, or it was Herm Albright that said, there's a person I can quote that said, a positive attitude may not solve all of your problems, but it'll annoy enough people to make it worth the effort. And, and so,
Yeah, that's a good one.
yeah, but and so I do know that attitude is everything, and that my living is determined by not what life brings to me, but by a lot of the times the attitude that I bring to my life. And so that's important. I had a friend so other people have inspired me or motivated me. I had a friend that said, and I think of this a lot, and he said to me, his name was Thaddeus Newman, and he died of a brain aneurysm at the age of 32. And he was in a wheelchair, but he was also totally blind. He had diabetes and Charcot-Marie-Tooth syndrome. And I said to him one day, and he oozed attitude, and I said, if you could have a choice, would you be blind or in a wheelchair? And he said, oh, it's simple, it's easy. He said, blind. I went, really? Because I'm such a visual person. I'm an artist. I paint. I feed off of wilderness and off of nature and the visual. and he said blind, it's beginning life in a new dimension. B-L-I-N-D, beginning life in a new dimension. And each time I'm at that point of challenge and struggle and woe is me, it's like, okay, Amanda, how can you begin your life in a new dimension? And instead of saying F-E-A-R, I'm sure you're filled with all of these acronyms, you know, and being fearful. And F-E-A-R, what is fear? Tom Crum says, you know, you could either choose to look at it as fuck everything and run, or you can choose to say, well, what's your fantasy experienced as real? And so if I'm able to somehow turn that around, and the way that I do that with my tools is I seek my inspiration through meditation. And I'm able to go within, and I'm able to somehow come out with a happier view of my current situation. It's like, okay, Amanda, let's go back, let's go within, what is it? And so attitude, meditation, what I did yesterday, I'm at a challenging point in my life right now, in my career path. And yesterday I thought, okay, instead of waking up anxiety-ridden, what are you going to do about it, Amanda? I seek my inspiration and my energy from nature, from wilderness. I went out to wilderness yesterday. I was one with nature. And I had another pivotal moment, and then we can wrap it up. And it was a moment about learning to be still. And I'm paralyzed. I know about being still, but learning to quieten the mind and being still. And the power of that. Shall I share this story quickly?
You share whatever you want to share.
Okay. So I have many tools, and it's hard for me to just define each one, and I could if we had more time. But learning to be still and go within and know that this moment I'm okay, and that power of acceptance and somehow bringing hope, whatever hope is for you, into the equation so that they coexist. They're my tools. But this was a powerful moment. When I was 13, I read a book called I Can Jump Puddles by Alan Marshall. It's an Australian book. And this boy contracted polio. He was 5 years old. He contracted polio. He was in a big wheelchair. He was pushed out by a nurse into the gravel. He looked down, his wheels were spinning. A friend came down the footpath, which is a sidewalk, and threw some lollies, which is candy, to the boy over the fence to Alan, and he threw himself out of the wheelchair, and he landed on the ground, paralyzed, partially paralyzed, and he took the candy, and the candy was one of those candies that had something like I love you on it, and he unwrapped the candy and the lolly, and he kept taking it out and looking at the words disappear. And he lay in the sunshine, and he just savored the sweetness of the moment. And nothing else mattered at that moment. That he was paralyzed, that he was savoring the sweetness of the deliciousness of that moment.
Well, it's a very good inspirational message. A lot of people don't take the time to realize the experience.
So I was 13, right? I read this book. This Alan Marshall went on to climb mountains with crutches, and I read the book and I thought, I was inspired by this story. I wrote a poem because we had to write something for our class and bring it back to our English teacher. I wrote about disabilities. I wrote about being paralyzed and being in a wheelchair when I was 13.
Wow.
And at the end of the poem I said, thank you, God, for making me me. I had forgotten about that poem until later on in life. And I went with a leadership group out into the wilderness in the Rocky Mountains. And the group was told to go climb the mountain and bring something back to the group that meant something, and to share it with the group. And Alan Marshall jumped puddles. He didn't care about getting covered in mud.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out to climb my mountain. Everybody else climbed the mountain.
Right.
I went into the grove of aspens, and I couldn't climb my mountain. I felt sorry for myself. I cried. I cursed. It's like, damn, I'm paralyzed. And then I had an epiphany, a pivotal moment. I remembered Alan Marshall. Somehow I remembered my 13-year-old self, and I remembered the poem. And I found myself saying, thank you, God, for making me me. And I took off my shoes in my wheelchair, and I placed my bare feet that I couldn't feel, and I placed my feet in the mud, because there were puddles, and there was mud, and I rolled in that mud, and I had mud up to my armpits, and I celebrated. And it's like, I can jump puddles. I can be Alan Marshall. I remembered my 13-year-old self. And after the 45 minutes or the hour, whatever time we were given, I rolled back to the group, empty-handed. And when it came
Not
time...
empty-headed, though.
When it came to share with the group, I shared with the group, and I peeled off my mud. And I peeled off the mud as though I was exposing the layers of myself, and those hidden layers that had laid dormant. And I peeled it off and I shared my mud. And I said to the group, I climbed my mountain, and thank you, God, for making me me.
Well, you certainly
And that I found happiness in being still.
Mm-hmm.
I found happiness in being still.
Well, I think anyone who listens to your story will also perhaps learn something from it. I really appreciate you sharing those intimate stories with us. Thank you.
You're very welcome. We didn't even talk about what I typically talk about.
This is the encore.
So the other two tools that have motivated me to keep going and to pull myself out of the depths of challenge so that I'm wiser and richer having gone through them is to recreate. I created co-founded an organization that enables individuals with disabilities to recreate, Challenge Aspen.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood that recreation is the bridge to that gap, to moving forward with life, because it brings joy. And if you can recreate with friends and family, combined with it, you forget about disability, adversity. And so to recreate, to bring myself out, so that's a key component. But the other thing is it ties back into moving your body. And for me, I've learned over the years that when I move my body, when I exercise it, when I'm in constant pursuit of quality of life, then everything feels better. Mm-hmm. My body, my attitude, and whatever I was so worried about shifts. A shift happens. And so moving my body, standing up, when I walk in bionic exoskeleton technology, I'm walking over ground. It's as though a veil's been lifted from my head and I can think more sharply and acutely. And I have better circulation in my legs. My digestive system functions better. Everything, I sleep better. And my neuropathic nerve pain dissipates completely. So there's a lot to be said for exercise and movement. There you go, done.
Okay. I can't agree with you more. I can't exercise as much as I used to, but it makes all the difference in every facet of your life.